We are truly blessed to be given this opportunity and would like to give a warm welcome to those who came today. Being able to experience something like this is important to us as students because some of us here today are not eligible to vote in this election, whereas others might.
For those who are eligible to vote this year, they will be given the opportunity to voice their opinions on what they truly believe is right, whereas those who aren't able to vote this year, like myself, we would like to use this forum as a way to get us ready for the upcoming election in the year 2016.
On behalf of Jolla Country Day School and the Pruess School, we would like to welcome the students, faculty, and parents of our two schools,
along with the members of the City Club of San Diego, who is also co-sponsoring this event. It is now our pleasure to introduce George Mitrovich, President of the City Club of San Diego.
Hello, everybody. Well, it's Monday, and we're in La Jolla, and this is Country Day, and so is there anything wrong in the world? Maybe not, or maybe. I want to quote something that I quoted yesterday when we did a Smart Vote program about the past 4 presidential elections. A total of 459 million Americans of eligible voting age did not vote. Someone said to me afterwards, but there's only 317 million. So you have to do it each presidential election. And if you go to the US Census Bureau website, you'll see that in each of those elections, more than 100 million eligible voters did not vote. Look, you can't have a democracy if you don't vote. And some of you are not yet eligible to vote. But knowing something about this school and knowing something about you as students, I'm guessing that the day you turn 18, the very first thing you will do is register to vote and fulfill the Athenian ideal of being a participant in democracy. The City Club loves this partnership with Country Day. We've been here a lot. We'll be back a lot. We benefit. We think you benefit. And for me personally, I never want to get to a point in my life where young people are not a part of it, because that's not a life worth living. And now welcome the one, the only, the semi-immortal, Hannah Shake.
Hello and welcome to La Jolla Country Day School campus and to the La Jolla Country Day and Pruess Political Forum with the candidates for the United States House of Representatives 52nd California District. My name is Hannah Shake and I am a student in the AP United States Government and Politics class. I would like to clarify for you the order of events that will be happening this afternoon. First, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that we are hosting a forum and not a debate. This means that the candidates will not be on stage at the same time, nor will they interact with each other on issues being discussed. Rather, each candidate will be questioned individually by LJCDS and Pruess students on a wide variety of topics for approximately 35 minutes, followed by 10 minutes allotted for questions from the audience. Councilman Carl DeMaio will appear first, and then will be followed by Congressman Scott Peters. We encourage you to write questions you have for the candidate on the index card provided, and to hand these index cards back to the AP Government students in the aisles. At the appropriate time, a selection of these questions will be directed to the candidates by the moderator. On behalf of all the AP Government students, I would like to ask the audience and my fellow classmates to please be respectful of the occasion and of the candidates. We hope you learn about the views of Mr. DeMaio and Mr. Peters on issues of importance to you. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Channel 6 News co-anchor Mark Bailey.
And that's no big deal, but being a proud Country Day parent is, both of my kids graduated from here. So I sat right down there at graduation and looked up here at the stage, and I thought, how in the world can I get up on that stage myself? I'm really nervous. I don't know about you. You all are aware that the 52nd District Congressional race in the state of California is one of the most hotly contested races and the most closely watched in the entire country. And La Jolla Country Day and the Pruess School have scored by getting both of the candidates here to ask them questions. I've met with the panelists ahead of time, and I can tell you they are primed, they are ready. My only instruction to them, and since this is not a debate, I'm just kind of here as a traffic cop, my only instruction to them was be respectful, and everything else is fair game. You're allowed to ask any question you like. If you don't think that you're getting the answer that you deserve from your question, you are welcome to follow up. And if you ask a yes or no question and you are not getting a yes or no answer, feel free to follow up and ask, is that a yes or a no, sir? And as long as you're respectful, I've always found in my career that's always been the way to go. So, with no further ado, and again, like I say, with no ground rules other than be respectful, I'll introduce the first candidate here today. He is a former city councilman. He's been appearing on our show, Wake Up San Diego, for at least 10 years now, starting with the Performance Institute, where he was a watchdog against wasteful government spending. He's a former San Diego City Councilman, and he is our first candidate here for the 52nd Congressional District in the great state of California. Let's welcome Carl DeMaio.
And Mark, it has been 10 years.
That's what I figured.
10
It was
years
about 10
since
years.
I started appearing on the show.
And I asked him from day one, I said, when are you going to run? Because the guys that ask the questions of the government, how are you spending my money, that's really what it's all about. Mr. DeMaio, before we start, let me have the panelists introduce themselves to you. I'll go right straight down the line. Please let Mr. DeMaio know which school you're with and let him know your name, and then we'll start.
Hello, my name is Nalman Haptom. I'm a senior at La Jolla Country Day School.
My name's Christos. I'm a senior at La Jolla Country Day School.
My name is Serena Jarwala, and I'm a senior with La Jolla Country Day School.
And my name is Ezequiel Contreras, and I'm with Pruess.
And with that, if you don't have any questions, then let's have the first question.
Currently, the Islamic State is making significant advances in Iraq and Syria, fighting the Syrian and Iraqi governments, as well as Kurds and numerous Syrian rebel groups, who are in turn also fighting the Syrian government. Additionally, Congress recently approved the president's request to arm Syrian rebels, as well as provide training. At this time, do you support arming Syrian rebels?
Well, first let me start out by saying thank you for putting this together. The last one that we did with the gentleman who will remain unnamed, I was real impressed by the questions, and that's why we're here today. And I want to applaud you for organizing this forum. ISIS is a national security threat. Americans' lives are on the line. And when we look at foreign policy, I believe we should be taking clear criteria that former Defense Secretary Cap Weinberger laid out in the 1980s. He was the Defense Secretary for Ronald Reagan during his presidency. And Cap Weinberger said we should only intervene in foreign issues, foreign conflicts, when two criteria are met. Number one, the issue is a national security threat, when he defined that as the lives of Americans are currently under threat or very soon will be under threat. And number two, we only intervene when we have a plan to win, and that we back up our service members with the resources they need to implement that winning plan. With ISIS, it's clear it's a national security threat, but I have severe reservations about the inadequacy of President Obama's plan. I don't believe it's a plan to win. I don't believe that he's supporting our military with the resources they need to immobilize ISIS and remove them as a threat. Former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, who served under Mr. Obama, has come out to also criticize President Obama's ISIS intervention plan, as well as, get this, former President Jimmy Carter has criticized President Obama. Now, those of you may know, when Jimmy Carter is criticizing your foreign policy, it must be really, really bad. And so I think our member of Congress from San Diego, because we are a military town, many of our residents here in San Diego are the ones that are on the tip of the spear. They are the ones that are going out and they are serving their country. I believe that our member of Congress should be vocal in demanding that we give our service members a solid plan and equip them with the resources to win using that plan. And so I believe that it's inadequate. I think we need to do more. And I think that our military members, when you ask them to put their lives on the line, they should be doing it because they not only have a national security threat to deal with, but we are giving them the tools to succeed. And I think that as a member of Congress, we need our local member of Congress to raise those issues when there's inadequate plans.
Follow up?
So you mentioned Leon Panetta, who in fact supported arming Syrian rebels as early as 2012. And you're saying it's inadequate. So does it mean you do support arming Syrian rebels then?
I think that not only do we need to arm the Syrian rebels, but we need to go beyond airstrikes. And that when the military advisors I have spoken to have said, and in fact in testimony on the Hill, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff basically said that we are likely to have to consider the issue of putting ground troops in. My view is we need to go in with a winning plan, not a political plan. And it sounds like what the president's trying to do is do enough to say that he's doing something, but not do enough to actually eliminate the threat. We need to eliminate the threat of ISIS. It takes bolder action than what the administration has proposed.
All right, asked and answered. Thank you, sir. Next question.
Moving on to another foreign policy affair. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has continued since November of 2013. In May, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. In an email to one of our students, you stated that you disagree with the president's plan of eliminating the possibility of U.S. ground forces because, quote, you should never show your full hand to the enemy. Mr. DeMaio, should we be treating Russia because of its aggression as an enemy country?
I think that Russia, by violating the territorial integrity of its neighbor, has demonstrated that it is not a friendly state. It is not a friendly ally. And we ought to uphold the rule of law. We ought to uphold the sovereignty of nations. This administration has done nothing to stand up to Vladimir Putin's intrusion into the Ukraine. Back in the 1980s, the last time Russia invaded another country, do you all remember when that was, or which country that was? That was Afghanistan. And in the 1970s, 1979, what did President Carter do? Well, he said, well, I'll show you. We're not going to go and send our Olympians to the Olympics in Russia. We're going to boycott the Olympics. And what did the Russians say? Well, great, more gold medals for us. We have to do more than simply phone call Vladimir Putin, which is what Mr. Obama did. We need to organize Western European allies, and we need to have an economic boycott of the oil and gas supplies that Russia sells to Europe. I call it the Marshall Plan of 2014, that we need to make sure that we support the Ukraine by imposing strong economic sanctions on Russia. And the only way to really put pressure on Vladimir Putin to respect the territorial integrity of the Ukraine is to hit them in the pocketbook, which is the oil and gas supplies that they ship to Western Europe, by providing an alternative supply through the U.S.
Follow-up?
Yes. In response to the economic sanctions already placed on Russia, Russia has placed embargoes on the European Union and created an ally with China through the Russia-China gas deal, which creates more economic opportunities for them. San Diego is, of course, a military city. If the sanctions become ineffective, would you be willing to send troops to defend our allies?
I have confidence that we are going to be able to bring a resolution to this issue if we impose the sanctions that will actually put pressure on Vladimir Putin. Right now, the sanctions that the administration has proposed and promulgated are completely ineffectual. They're not really providing any heat, any pressure on Vladimir Putin. I believe that what we have to do is go after the oil and gas sales. And you mentioned the China deal. That is a long-term deal, by the way. So it's not like they can replace these dollars that they would lose with effective sanctions with our European allies. I'm amazed by the quality of these questions. Are you?
You took the words out of my mouth.
This is impressive, Mark.
This is a civic lesson
This is
right now so
amazing.
far.
Okay, moving on to immigration reform. Okay. As you know, millions of undocumented immigrants are currently residing in the United States. Some members of your party in Congress have argued that they are hurting our economy and that some are bringing dangerous substances into our country. The Obama administration has increased deportation efforts, yet the issue of undocumented immigrants still remains. Mr. DeMaio, you have stated in multiple previous debates that border security should be accomplished before any other aspects of this issue are discussed. But if border security is the sole goal, that still leaves 11 million undocumented immigrants in America who are causing an oversupply of work, driving down wages, and putting American citizens out of work due to underpayment by shady employers. What specifically do you propose we do to handle these immigrants that are still in America?
Great question, and important to San Diego. given that we are a border city, but also given the fact that we've got great diversity in this city. So let me talk about this issue from terms of how I'm challenging my own party. San Diego, I believe, provides the model for how we should talk about immigration. Think about it. And I look around this audience, I see exactly what I am most proud of in San Diego. We are a city of great diversity. We have a third Africa, each with their own points of view and customs. We have different socioeconomic views. San Diego, however, with all this diversity, we're pretty laid back. We're very respectful. We're very integrated as a city. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of about our city, is that the tone, the tenor by which our communities talk to each other is very respectful. I do not believe the Republican Party has always spoken in a respectful manner about the diverse communities in this country. And I'm challenging the Republican Party to be more respectful in how it talks about these issues in terms of tone and tenor, and also embrace and be more inclusive. Now, on the issue of immigration, I believe we must start by securing the border first. It's not just an immigration issue, it's a national security issue. We just talked about ISIS and the threat that that group may pose to the United States. Border security has to be the foundation for any additional immigration reform. Because if we make immigration process improvements and not secure the border, people can always simply go around that process year after year, and we will still have an immigration challenge. So secure the border has to be a prerequisite. But we also need to adopt reasonable and important reforms in immigration. First, I agree with you. We ought to have sanctions against businesses that take advantage of cheap labor, that go into hiring practices without verifying employment status. And so I support the expansion of E-Verify. I support greater enforcement resources to hold these companies accountable. You know, the Republican Party points out that individuals are breaking the law, but they also don't seem to be focusing on businesses that break the law. Let's enforce the law with all parties. Second, I believe we need to expand some of our visa programs. For example, the H-1B visa program that allows us to bring in high skill sets in this country, engineering, biotechnology skill sets that we need in our economy. We also found out that we have an immigration visa program that's like a lottery system. You win the lottery and you get in. Rather, we should be strategic in looking at various standards for the individuals that we want to invite to be part of the American dream. Finally, we need to make sure that people who do come in here under work visas, that they maintain a job. Basically, a work visa is that you're permitted to be in the United States because you have a job to perform. If you lose that job, I don't believe that you are compliant with your permit. And we should be making sure that full employment is a prerequisite to any sort of visa program in this country.
I'm assuming you want to follow up. Okay.
All right. As you know, there is a bill that was recently passed in the Senate which would increase border security, as well as provide undocumented citizens with a path to citizenship and force employers to verify their employees, among other beneficial changes. In previous debates, you have said that you disagree with this bill because of the special interest influence on it. Now, Mr. DeMaio, you and I both know that when you say special interest, you really just mean stuff that the Democrats added to the bill.
No, actually, why do you think that? Help me understand. What specifically? Because you know my biggest concern about this bill. Let me tell you what my concern about the bill is. First, one of the biggest challenges we have in Washington is they pass these huge bills, thousands of pages long, with a variety of provisions that have no accountability on whether each and every provision is implemented. What I believe is that what we ought to do is take good ideas and run single subject bills. For example, we find in this country Democrats, Republicans, and people in between, independents, they agree that we ought to have a secure border. If you take a look at all the polling in this country, there's great bipartisan agreement of securing the border first. According to a PPIC poll done a month ago, even Latinos see securing the border as a key priority. Well, if the American people agree on an issue like that so widely, Why is it that we haven't been able to get that done in Congress? Because you have partisanship, you have political games played in these big bills where both sides try to put poison pills in to embarrass the other side. And both sides are doing it, Democrats and Republicans. What I want to see done is break up those mega bills into specific single subject reforms, thoughtful reforms that we can then hold the administration accountable for implementing. This is an administration that has taken those big bills and they've read the bills as part of a compromise. They've read the bills and said, all right, now that the bill passed, the things that we don't like, we're not going to implement. The things that we held out for and got a concession on, those are the things we're going to implement. I think the American people need to know that when we pass a bill, that the bill is fully implemented first and that we hold the administration accountable. That's why I want to see a series of single subject bills on immigration. I think it would be a far better approach to solving this issue.
Might I, on behalf of the original question, which if I heard it correctly was, what would you do with the 11 million illegal immigrants that are already in the country? Can I just get some clarification on that?
I think part of it is making sure that the individuals that do have jobs and are paying into the system, if they meet the criteria of the revised visa programs, then I would see us having a process whereby they could continue to be here and update their visa status. But for individuals, for example, of the 11 million, some estimates say that about 300 to 500,000 of them have criminal backgrounds. I talk to Latinos and they tell me, do something about this. If they have a criminal background, they should not be in this country. And so I think that you can't broadly deal with the 11 million, that what we have to deal with are specific categories and bring them into compliance with our nation's immigration laws. For folks that have criminal backgrounds, I think the answer is clear, that they should not be allowed to stay with criminal backgrounds.
All right, very good. Next question.
All right, so you mentioned securing the border. What specific changes would you propose be implemented?
A great question. My opponent had an opportunity to vote on a very narrow bill to provide funding and to give our border agents the tools they need to secure the border. This bill was brought up in July. You want to talk about partisanship? My opponent voted against this modest compromise bill because the Democrat leader, Nancy Pelosi, said we do not want any Democrat votes for this bill. She twisted his arm, and as a result, he voted against it. Now, this bill would provide the following things that are absolutely necessary. Number one, a legal protocol by which refugees can be expedited and returned to their country if they don't meet the eligibility for entry into the United States. Number two, it would provide financial resources for additional equipment and personnel to patrol the border. And number three, it corrects a very misguided decision by the Obama administration. The Obama administration declared a large swath of our border to be national park space. Now, how many of you have been to a national park growing up? They're great places to go for recreation. But this is not your typical national park. The administration declared a very narrow corridor along the border a national park, not because it really is parkland, but because they wanted to make sure that the Border Patrol could not use vehicles to patrol the border. Because of that designation, they can only use horses. How can you patrol the border if you're not given the tools like vehicles to go and patrol that stretch of the border? And so this bill would have corrected that. It would have said that the Border Patrol can use trucks and vehicles. I want to go one further. How many of you know about the drones, the General Atomics company here in San Diego that creates these unmanned aerial vehicles, the drone vehicles? People say, well, how can we watch every stretch, every inch of the border? Technology. Technology can help us secure the border and then can channel resources to individuals that are crossing illegally. I believe that we have, in this country, we are such a great country, I do not subscribe to the notion that this country can't secure the border. I believe we can do anything that this country puts its mind to, and the reforms in this basic border bill that I just referenced are, I think, that just the beginning steps of accomplishing the secure border that all Americans want to see.
Mr. DeMaio, there have been serious allegations of sexual harassment brought against you. You personally invited CNN to your campaign headquarters to see documents you said would prove the allegations false. However, according to CNN, the documents they received from your campaign were not conclusive, and your campaign did not authorize the documents for release to the public, leaving the public unable to form their own opinions. CNN reports that when they tried to send follow-up questions, they were first directed to your campaign manager, and then Ben Ginsberg, a high-profile lawyer notable for working on the Bush and Romney presidential campaigns, and then back again to your campaign manager without receiving answers to their questions. A representative from your campaign then accused CNN of conducting, quote, a partisan witch hunt. Mr. DeMaio, do you believe CNN is carrying out a partisan witch hunt against you?
I believe the CNN story got it completely wrong, and they were given an opportunity to see a mountain of evidence that would have eliminated any credibility for the accuser. Those of you here know that your teachers tell you that you're not allowed to copy other people's work. It's called plagiarism. This individual in May plagiarized a report from the National Journal. He was held accountable for his plagiarism, and he was fired. 2 weeks later, our campaign office was broken into. Every computer was smashed, every single phone cord was cut. $7,000 in damage. Only one thing was stolen from the campaign: our campaign strategy book, which includes all of our polling, all of our plans for television buys. It includes our direct mail, designs on our direct mail pieces, all of our message points, all of our schedules. That book was then given by someone to my opponent, Scott Peters, in early June. He took possession of stolen information. When this individual was contacted by the police department, only then did he make up this lie. I can't control a lie being told about me by someone who's under a criminal investigation. What I can do is tell you it's an outrageous lie. It has no place in San Diego politics. Instead of us talking about how we can get people back to work in this country, instead of us talking about how we deal with K through 12 education and improving our schools, or making sure that our veterans have benefits, in the last 20 days of this campaign, my opponent is now using this smear in both paid and unpaid campaign advertising to drag this campaign into the mud. It's false, it's disgusting, and it has no place in San Diego politics.
So was that a yes, you do believe CNN has been unfairly targeting you?
I think that CNN got the story wrong, and I think that the evidence as it comes out will absolutely validate that.
Was there a reason why your campaign shifted from being open, as you initially were, to being very unwilling to discuss the details of the situation?
We've been very open. I mean, this question has come up multiple times. I can't be more emphatic. We've provided a variety of information, including the fact that my campaign manager took a lie detector test administered by the San Diego Police Department on these allegations and passed. I don't know what else I can say, but frankly, if we are at a point in our political system where someone can make an unsubstantiated allegation without a shred of evidence to support it, and that becomes the focus of a campaign for weeks, then our political system has really, really sunk to a new low. I think San Diegans deserve better than that. San Diegans deserve to know where we stand on the issues, and not this sort of mudslinging that my opponent, Scott Peters, seems to be promoting.
Asked and answered?
So the reason you have not been as transparent in terms of releasing documents to the public is because you believe that this is unnecessary, or you're unwilling to do so, Mr. DeMaio?
I think what's important is that this is still a criminal investigation into the break-in in my office, and I want to make sure that this person is held accountable for the damage they did to our campaign. I think the most important question that could be asked of Mr. Peters is why, when you got the stolen campaign briefing book, when you got stolen material given to you by an individual, why did you not tell your opponent that their entire playbook, it's like playing football, your entire set of moves was given to the other team? Integrity would demand that you would let that team know. Mr. Peters is a lawyer, and in law, if any of you want to go to law school, you'll learn this. When a lawyer receives evidence in a case, they have a legal obligation to tell opposing counsel that they have come across evidence. In this case, Mr. Peters received our campaign strategy book. He did not have the character to call me and say, Carl, I've received your entire campaign strategy, and it's early June. I believe this was stolen from your office. And Carl, I want to give this back to you. No. He sat silently for months. And the other question, besides why did you keep this a secret, Mr. Peters, the other question to ask him is, you know who gave you this book. Can you name that person?
So the reason that your campaign called it a partisan witch hunt is because it was confidential information?
I think that it's pretty clear that in the remaining days of a campaign, an unsubstantiated smear being brought up with no evidence and no substantiation, it clearly is dirty politics, and it's unfortunate that the Peters camp has been promoting this.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a brief question, and I'll ask this on behalf of Coach Hutzler. My son played football here. Who in your campaign left your entire playbook and strategy out where a common criminal could break in and steal your entire playbook? Any one of the football players that play here at Country Day would face severe punishment for such behavior. And why would a playbook be left someplace not under lock and key?
It was under lock and key. It was at our campaign office under lock and key. You know, you don't expect someone to break into your office, just like you don't expect someone to break into your home.
Watergate.
Well, you know,
People do break into offices. We all know that.
But you know what? It has no place. It should be absolutely. The fact that our campaign playbook was confirmed on Friday to have found its way into Mr. Peters' hands in June, and he said nothing for months on this, that is very troubling. And so, you know, look, we lock up our office every night. Our office was broken into, and that was verified by the police. And so what else can we do besides lock our office every night? You know, people can break into our computer system, I guess. It's called hacking. But it doesn't make it right. And certainly I wouldn't blame a victim of a robbery for the fact that someone decided to break into their home and take their money or take their possessions.
Just the cop and me asking an investigative question.
Exactly.
Thanks for the indulgence.
Absolutely.
All right, anybody else?
This regards privacy concerns. Under both Democratic and Republican administrations, the NSA has spied on foreign leaders like the presidents of Brazil and Mexico and the Chancellor of Germany. Clearly, this hurts U.S. foreign relations. If elected to Congress, would you vote to end these programs and those that apply to American citizens?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that your email, your cell phone, and your text messages are none of the government's business. They ought to remain private. We have in this country the Constitution. The Constitution gives us freedoms. It gives us the expectation and the right of privacy. If government wants to get your records, they should give you the due process of getting a search warrant. There's an amendment to the Defense Reauthorization Bill that allows for common sense reforms to the spying program that you just mentioned. I would have voted for that amendment so that you have freedom, that your messages are private, that we're not spying on foreign leaders. That bill was voted against by my opponent, Scott Peters. I believe privacy and freedom is so important, and I will be a strong defender of both.
And a quick return to the Islamic State. So you said you were willing to consider ground troops in Iraq and Syria. Would you be willing to use ground troops in other countries that include Islamist groups such as Boko Haram in Nigeria or Al-Shabaab in Somalia?
I think right now we have a clear and present danger with ISIS, and our focus ought to remain on that.
Let me just remind everybody of the clock. In 5 minutes, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So we have 5 minutes left with our panel, so I'll let you confer for just a moment and decide how you want to proceed with the remaining time we have. And then I'll ask that those questions be gathered up and brought down to me, and we'll ask some questions from the audience. Go right ahead.
All right, so you've expressed a desire in limiting perks for Congress in your Fix Congress First Act. How do you plan to gain congressional and bipartisan support for this act?
It's a great question. I feel very passionately about the notion that our elected representatives should live under the same laws as the rest of us. No special exemptions. When I was sworn in on the San Diego City Council, my first act in office was I cut my own compensation 22%. Why? Because we were in the middle of a fiscal crisis in 2008. They had cut our libraries 42%. They eliminated after-school programs. They cut park and rec programs. These are things that all of us, I know all of you, feel are very important to your education and your learning. My opponent made all those cuts, put the city on the brink of bankruptcy. And so my view was, starting right on day one, I needed to lead by example. Not because someone asked me to, but because it was the right thing to do. Cutting my own compensation 22%, giving up the politician pension. By doing that, I gave up $500,000 in payments for the rest of my life. It's a lot of money. We cut our office budget by 20% because I figured that if I'm asking city departments to save a little money, I should show that I can do this myself. Leading by example. We need to do the same in Washington. Politicians in Washington should live under the same laws as us. They should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act, which would allow us to get their records, public records. They should be told that if they don't pass a budget on time, they don't get paid. My opponent, his vote allowed members of Congress to get paid even though they shut down the government. I think that's wrong. If you didn't do your job, you wouldn't get paid. If you didn't turn in your homework, you wouldn't get the grade. And so we need the same level of accountability in Washington. I'd also eliminate their special subsidies, the free travel that they get from special interest groups, and the lavish congressional pension program that they've given themselves. They need to start living under our laws. If the laws are good enough for us, they should be good enough for members of Congress.
Right, that's a marvelous response. But how do you plan to get bipartisan congressional support for this act?
When I tour the country, when I talk to San Diegans, most importantly, I'm finding that Democrats, excuse me, Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between, the people love this idea. This doesn't have a party label associated with it. This is like America. We want our elected officials to lead by example and live under the same laws as us. So I think by building public support and creating a groundswell that every single congressional member will start hearing about the Fix Congress First initiative. More importantly, in this campaign in 2014, many Democrats are now running under the reforms that I propose under Fix Congress First. So there's bipartisan support there. And finally,
I always just look at that as my tax dollars at work, so.
let's hear it for our armed services.
All right, last question, then we'll go to the audience.
But finally, let me just say, when I was sworn in San Diego City Council, they said, we don't think that you're going to be able to get this pension reform thing done. You're not going to be able to reform some of these things in city government. In my first week, I got the perks stripped of the members of Congress, members of the City Council. They were going to Qualcomm and Petco Park, and they got themselves a luxury box. The members of City Council got free tickets to go into these sporting events. We were able to strip them of those tickets and give those tickets only to community volunteers. Second, in 2012, under my pension reform initiative, we stripped them of their politician pensions. Now, members of the City Council can only get a simple 401k, the same benefit as the rest of us out there. These are reforms. The auto allowance. This is a big one. My opponent took $69,334 in free taxpayer payments for his car. Drives a BMW. $69,334. How many of you have parents that you guys get paid, they get paid to drive to and from work by their employer? Anyone get that? Why would members of the city council get that special perk? We were able to eliminate the automatic auto allowance, and now each member of the city council has to specifically ask for it in order to get it. That was a big reform because it puts each member of the city council on notice that they're doing something that everyone else has not been doing.
If there's is there a follow-up to that? Otherwise,
No.
we're going to conclude with the panel. One last burning question is the one that you cannot resist asking.
I would
There
like to
is.
if
Go
there's
ahead.
time.
I see it in your eyes. Go ahead.
Mr. DeMaio, during the September 23rd debate on NBC7, you stated in terms of social issues, you do not believe government and Congress is the place for politicians to, quote, impose their moral views on the rest of us. You also stated that you are willing to stand up to members of your own party. How do you plan on convincing other Republicans to stop addressing these divisive social issues, some which many feel very strongly about?
I feel very strongly about this notion that you ought to be able to make your own decisions on your health care. You ought to be able to love who you want to love. You ought to be able to be who you want to be. We shouldn't be spying on your cell phone records. We ought to respect your personal freedom. And guess what? There are some in this country that don't agree with that. They want to tell you how to live your life. They don't want some people to marry. I think that's wrong. And I think that those divisive issues that we ought to be focusing on, things that we absolutely need to take action on, which is fixing the economy, fixing the financial crisis, making sure that you have access to college loans and student aid. Those are issues that people really do want to see their elected representatives talk about and solve. So my hope is that we can settle these issues in favor of letting individuals have the right, the personal freedom to make decisions in the context of their own family, faith, and personal beliefs. These politicians can't balance a checkbook. Why are they telling us how to live our lives? This is a long overdue change, and I think you, the next generation, people who are 15, 16, all the way up to 35 years old, the next generation agrees with me that we ought to respect personal freedoms in this country. I think it's going to happen.
All right, can I get a nice round of applause for the panel? Amazingly well thought out questions, great follow-up questions, and you don't get any tougher questions from
No, this is
either journalist team.
amazing.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
really good.
it doesn't get any easier, because here's some of the questions from the audience.
All right.
And I have no idea, they're in no particular order, but this one was sitting on top, and it pertains to the last question. To those LGBT community members that boo you at events, what do you think they misunderstand about your platform?
I think, a lot of folks in the LGBT community are curious, how could you be a member of the Republican Party? And you know what my response to that is? How else are we going to change? If you don't show up to communities that may not agree with you, how can you start touching hearts so you can change minds? So my partner and I freely go to communities that may not respect our relationship. What I find, though, is that by interacting, these individuals start realizing that we're no different than they are. We have the same challenges, the same relationship hurdles as any other relationship out there. I believe that the work for full equality in this country, which has been done in so many other communities, that the Democrat Party has recognized that we should have full equality, that the remaining work has to be done in those Republican circles. I'm willing to carry the water by being present and challenging the party to change on those issues. It's necessary, and I believe that most people, the vast majority of people in the LGBT community understand that. There are some partisan Democrat members of that community that won't support me no matter what because they disagree with me on other issues, and that's okay.
All right, what's your opinion regarding undocumented students residing in San Diego? Should they be allowed to receive aid in order to pay for college?
You know, there's a bill that Congressman Jeff Denham is supporting that relates to ROTC and military service. I think that that's a thoughtful bill. I would support that. And I'm looking at, again, ways that we can start creating compliance programs to bring people into full compliance with our immigration laws.
All right, well, this is interesting. It's a two-parter, but basically it's one question. Would you work on making marijuana a Class 2 drug instead of keeping it a Class 1, but really more to the point, Also, would you work on legalizing marijuana federally?
I believe that California voters in the 1990s got it right, that in this state they want to have medical marijuana. We haven't implemented that law yet. It's been almost 15 years and we still haven't implemented that law. Why? Because the federal government classifies marijuana as an illegal substance and tells states that you don't have the right to regulate this and that we're going to go and enforce. I would support legislation at the federal level to get the federal government out of enforcement on marijuana and let the states decide. In Colorado, their voters went a step further than we did in California. They allow for medical marijuana and recreational use as well. What I want to do is make sure that the voters' decision in California is implemented without any sort of federal impediment or challenge.
Let me just follow up by asking you, and this is based on my experience as a police officer and my experience as a journalist. Is the medical marijuana part of this argument just a smokescreen, quite literally, in order to legalize the recreational use of marijuana? Because we have doctor after doctor come on our show on San Diego 6 that says it's not a medicine. We don't want to keep it out of the hands of people that find some relief from it. That's not our intent. But smoking something is not a good delivery system for any medicine, and we don't find THC to be especially viable as a medicine. So, I mean, is it medicinal, or should we just be honest like Colorado and say, hey, we're going to legalize recreational use of pot?
You know, I'm not a doctor, but I do talk to patients, and they swear by it. And so voters in California decided that they want to provide for medical marijuana for people who have ailments that could be aided by this treatment. And again, I want to see the voter intent implemented.
So you're in favor of medical marijuana but not recreational marijuana?
That's the state law right now. Let's get that one right, and then let's look at additional changes that might need to be made down the line.
Okay. This one says, I've seen a lot of negative campaigning of each candidate on TV. Whew. How do you think this helps your campaign? And this is a question, of course, for both candidates, and it'll be asked of Mr. Peters as well.
I'm proud of the fact that I ran positive ads talking about my work in City Hall and saving the city from bankruptcy, reforming the city, and putting money back into our community service programs like after-school programs and libraries. We made government work in San Diego, and isn't that what it's all about? So my ads have been focusing on my record as a reformer. In my latest ad, I talk about being an independent mind, willing to take on either party to make government work for all. That's been my record in San Diego. It'll be my record in Washington. The big issue I think that we need to address to stop some of these nasty attack ads is we need to get campaign finance reform in this country. We need to get big money from both labor unions as well as big businesses out of politics. They form these things called super PACs. They come in with millions of dollars and they run ads trashing the other side. Both sides do it. It's a bipartisan game that they've been playing. My hope is that we can enact the campaign finance reform proposals that I've laid out so that people are giving money to the candidates and that the candidate has to take accountability for the ads being run. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, I saw your ad, you know, Scott Peters in a car, or Scott Peters, I said, you know what? That's not my ad. And under the law, I can't even talk to them about that.
Now, that's a point of clarification. If you actually do not appreciate some of those ads being run on your behalf, are you not free to go to that group and say, please, that's not who I am, I don't like that ad, please pull that?
No, in fact,
I don't like that.
In fact, and again, looking at the law, I'm like, well, why can't we do this? The law says you cannot communicate with those groups. Plain and simple.
Would you elect to pull that particular ad?
That's why we need to change the law.
Would you elect to pull that particular ad, the one of Mr. Peters in the car? Would you elect personally, if it was up to you, to pull that ad?
I'm not going to violate the law by saying one way or another what these outside groups should be doing.
You're talking to me. You're talking to anybody from the campaign.
I want these outside groups to be out of politics by getting full campaign finance reform enacted during my term in Congress.
So you can't tell me whether or not you would pull that ad?
I don't want to have someone come and say that Carl DeMaio was communicating at a public forum against an independent expenditure. I don't want to say that.
And I will grant you that, is that could be interpreted as communicating through me back to that group. That's a fair answer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give Mr. DeMaio about 30 seconds, and we are right on time. We will take only a 5-minute break, so please don't go anywhere. just remain in place, stand up, stretch when Mr. DeMaio is finished, and then we'll bring Mr. Peters out, and we'll have the second half of our program. But Carl, thank you again very, very much. 30 seconds to just wrap
30
it up.
seconds. Let me just say, I am so appreciative and impressed that you guys have done this forum. I was impressed 2 years ago when you held a similar forum. And, you know, this is your country. This is your future. And so my hope is that we'll demand action by both parties to make sure your future is as bright as ours was. Thank you very much.
All right, the second half of our Q&A session here today is with the gentleman that is currently the representative from the 52nd District here in California. He's seeking re-election. He's appeared on San Diego 6 many times in the morning, and what I will say about Mr. Scott Peters is he's never shied away from the tough questions. He knows that this panel is prepared to challenge him today, and he expects nothing less. And he's promised that he will answer to the best of his ability. He is your congressman from this 52nd District and wants to be once again. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott Peters.
Thank you. Right here?
And what we'll do is we'll have this panel introduce themselves to Mr. Peters, and we'll give you a chance maybe just for maybe a 30-second opening remark after they do, and then off we'll go.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello guys, my name is Sid Masi and I am a senior from La Jolla Country Day.
Hello, my name is Riley Kennedy. I'm also a senior here at Country Day.
My name is Lucy Parrots. I'm a senior at La Jolla Country Day.
Good afternoon. My name is Belen Hernandez and I'm from the Pruess School UCSD.
I think normally the way these things just naturally flow is maybe just a quick hello and a quick opening statement. We'll jump right to the questions.
Well, hello. It's a pleasure to be back here again. I've come to La Jolla Country Day many times to see this city club, to see Mr. Schulman's classes. I think I've entertained visitors in D.C., and it's nice to be here again. I can tell you that it's a lot better to be in San Diego than any place else.
All right. Thank you for being here. Go ahead with the first question.
Once again, Mr. Peters, thank you for coming to our school. We really appreciate you taking out the time to do this. So, first question. Many in this amphitheater will soon be going to college. However, the cost of a 4-year college degree today is astoundingly expensive. This either leaves graduates with enormous amounts of debt or makes college less accessible in the first place.
Right.
Studies show that it is extremely difficult to find a job without a college degree, with the unemployment rate of workers with only a high school diploma being double that of college degree holders. Furthermore, the average salaries of workers with only a high school diploma are significantly lower than that of a college graduates. Mr. Peters, you have introduced and co-sponsored several bills. Assuming these bills have hypothetically passed, and if they have hypothetically passed, specifically, what will you do that you have not already done to reduce the burden of college on America's youth?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's a critical question, not just for you, but for the country. You know, the economy is increasingly brain-powered. And if we don't educate the people who qualify for college to help us compete, the country's going to fall behind. My own experience in student loans and financial aid is personal. My father is a minister. My mom stayed home with me and my 3 sisters. And I could not have gone to college if it wasn't for the aid I got. But we never had any question when I was growing up in the late 70s that if I studied hard and got good grades, I could go to college. I was able to be admitted to Duke University, which was an expensive school for our family. But through grants, low-interest student loans, and a work-study job, and my job actually was for $2.65 cleaning the pigeon cages in the psychology department. But that helped me get through school and helped me get on with a career. And the challenges today are much tougher. And the main problem is that the cost of education has increased so much. In the 30 years since I've been in college, the cost of a private or a public university education, which is where 80% of kids get educated, has gone up by 300% adjusted for inflation. And we all have work to do at the state level to make sure that we continue to invest in the UCs and the state system and the community colleges to make sure that those are affordable for everyone. But at the same time, the federal government can't be undercutting financial aid, and that's what I've been fighting on. I have a bill that would reduce all student loans, future and current, to 4%. 4% interest is about what we pay at the federal government. And we don't want kids to come out with all this debt. We know that they are being discouraged from even go to college because they're scared about the debt. They're dropping out more rapidly because of the debt. I've been an advocate for it, not just recently, but for a long time. I just call your attention to my opponent's approach, which is part of this. If you look at this thing called the Citizens Budget that he authored, and also a article he authored in the Washington Times in 2006, he would have cut $50 million. He would have cut $50 million out of support for Cal State low-interest loans or financial aid for Cal State. In the op-ed he wrote in 2006, he would have eliminated the Perkins loan program, which is a low-interest loan program. I think that's exactly the wrong way to go. And I know he's taken a new view today, but you have to look at his history. He's never renounced this. In fact, he's still on the payroll of the group that produced this, which is the Reason Foundation, which is a real center of right-wing thinking. I think it's a real important question, and one in which my opponent and I are certainly differentiated.
But Mr. Peters, you bring up the cost of college and you want to keep having student loans, but a major issue is that tuition keeps going up, and that is a central issue why we have to take out these loans. So how would you tackle that issue? Like, for example, taking a developed economy, in the United Kingdom, the University of Cambridge only costs $14,500 or £9,000. So why is it so much that tuition here is so expensive? What would you do to tackle that directly?
I just got a little, the question is about the cost of tuition, what we can do about that. In our country, the state systems are run by the states. And I think California is called the Golden State because we invested in our universities, our Cal State system, our UC system, and our community colleges. We all need to work together to make sure that our state continues to recognize that that's the font of prosperity here, and that we need to make sure that at the state level, tuitions are affordable for the average family, like the family I grew up in. At the federal level, that really is more of a financial aid issue than a tuition issue. And that's what I've been fighting on at that level.
Did you hear an answer?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Sorry. But what specific actions would you take that you've not already done to lower the cost? Because it's coming up and it's expensive. I mean.
Okay. Well, again, I would say fundamentally, the cost of the tuition at the UC system, for instance, is decided by California. And we should all work in partnership with California legislators to make sure that that's lowered, one. Two is we can impose some performance standards on universities that get financial aid from the federal government to make sure that their people are getting a return on their investment. But again, that doesn't directly answer what the direct answer to your question is that that's an issue for the state government to respond to. And we should do that in partnership with them. And I'm a resident of California. I vote for state legislators as well. We have to get the state budget to see this education and lower tuition as a priority. Gavin Newsom was just out campaigning for me, the lieutenant governor. He's on the Board of Regents. He said to the students at UCSD, come out and let people know we can't have the tuition increase again. Because if students are quiet about it, tuition will continue to go up. And we all need to be advocates for that, you as much as me, at the state level.
So can I just follow up on his behalf? Then are you saying that it is more of a federal or more of a state issue than it is a federal issue, and the office you're running for is a federal office?
Right, the cost of tuition. But the federal government plays a very important role in providing financial aid and has since I was in college and was a recipient of it myself.
Yes?
I think that answers my question. Thank you.
This one's about immigration. Millions of undocumented immigrants are currently residing in the United States. Mr. Peters, you have stated that you are in favor of the bill recently passed in the Senate, which would provide most undocumented immigrants with a path to citizenship, increase border security, and force employers to verify their employees, among other changes. You've also stated that, quote, if the Speaker would put this before the House, we could have immigration reform the next day, end quote. Because San Diego is a border city, this is a pressing issue for us, and we need quick action. As someone who considers himself an independent thinking Democrat who is willing to cross partisan lines to get stuff done, how will you work with Republicans, including Speaker John Boehner, to get this bill on the floor and pass this reform for our city? What would you compromise on?
Well, I think it's important to see that the bill before, well, let me start with the importance of this to San Diego. Whether you talk to Qualcomm or Solar Turbines who need high technology workers here, whether you talk to home health care providers or hotel workers, or you talk to farmers who literally need people to pick the crops so that they don't rot in the sun. We need labor, and we're not generating enough labor from within the country. And immigration reform would be an important part of that. We also know we're spending a lot of resources on law enforcement to try to punish people who really are a part of our economy today if we were being realistic. We have people we call dreamers who moved here as children, and we're trying to send them back to countries they've really never known because we have these antiquated and outdated laws. So what we need is a compromise like the Senate bill. The Senate bill is a compromise. It's a compromise between Republicans and Democrats. Had 69 votes in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, that would deal with all of those issues, would provide the permission slips, if you will, to let those people in the country, would really amp up border security and way beyond what many Democrats said they wanted, including an entire new fencing, doubling of the Border Patrol. It is a compromise. And so the frustration we have is that here's something that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is the national business advocate, agrees with the unions on. It's something that the farm workers and the farmers agree on. That almost never happens. It's the tech community, the faith community, they all want to do it. What we really need to do is push the House of Representatives, the Speaker, to let us vote on it. And if we did, we would have immigration reform. It would pass, and the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has indicated that would lead to 5.4% economic growth over the next 20 years. It would lower the budget deficit by about $800 billion, and would help Social Security because a lot of the money that's not being paid in today would be paid in. So I'm asking your help to advocate that we at least get a vote. When I was a city council president, we voted on things. I was anxious to vote on them. I was anxious to get through them. And I would never have thought that for political reasons those things would be held up. So, we've signed discharge petitions. We've asked the Speaker to let us vote on it. Let us debate it. And that's all I can do. We'll continue to go at it because it's really important. It's important for the country.
Can I just pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you? The
Sure.
folks in the back.
It sounds like it's reverberating. Is that better?
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
makes it, he doesn't have to
Oh,
crank
look,
it so
Rory
loud.
Devine says she can hear me now. That's
Perfect.
good. Okay.
Thank you, sir. And let me just, while there's just that little break there, remind everybody that we are taking your questions once again at about 1:30 at the latest. I'm going to pick up those questions, and we'll ask the questions from the audience in the last 10 minutes of our program. All right? Right ahead.
So is what I'm hearing that at this time you've done all you can do to get this bill on the floor, or are there more compromises you think you can make at this moment?
I can't even force the Speaker to even put it in front of the Congress. I'm willing to talk to anybody, and this has been my history too. I mean, a lot of people talk about being willing to compromise. I was elected the City Council President unanimously because my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, could work with them. And that's been my record. And so I'm willing to talk to anybody. I think the one thing you'd say about my opponent is that he's indicated he would vote against that compromise bill. But we have a compromise that the Senate made over a lot of hard work, Republicans and Democrats. If there are compromises to be made, I've shown a willingness to do that and then to vote for things. And I feel like what we would like to do is have the Speaker give us a chance to even talk about this really pressing national issue.
Mr. Peters, a question has been asked about making college more affordable and about undocumented students. The combination of these two topics is a disputed topic in Congress. It is difficult for U.S. citizens to pay for higher education, and even more so for non-U.S. citizens. Many of the students, as you have mentioned, have lived here their entire lives and have no intention of returning to their native countries. Do you believe undocumented students should have access to federal student loans and grants? And if so, what do you plan to do to make this a law? Or what other methods are there to increase the use of these potential human resources?
I am a supporter of the DREAM Act, have been from the beginning. When I ran last time, I defeated one of the most anti-immigrant congressmen in the entire Congress 2 years ago. And that says a lot about San Diego. And I can tell you, I'm going to continue that fight. We are a nation of immigrants. We've always been a nation of immigrants, and we're proud of it. We should be proud of it again. We shouldn't view the border just as some threat. The border is an opportunity. And we know that our strength as an economy comes from our relationship with Tijuana, for instance, not fighting a fight with Tijuana. So I'm very much on board with that. I'm a supporter of the DREAM Act, and will continue to support those policies and educating those kids going forward.
Okay, so I'm looking for a yes or no answer. Do you support undocumented students having access to federal student loans and grants? And my follow-up question would be, what measurable, timely steps can we expect to see from you in Congress?
I'm supportive of the DREAM Act that would enable people to get, to provide procedures for undocumented, people are undocumented today, to become documented and then qualify.
And about the timely steps we expect to see from you in Congress?
You know, you're asking me to pass laws, and I understand that. And I'm telling you that one of the problems we've had is that the Tea Party has locked up the speaker so much that he won't put laws before us. I don't have control over that. One thing you can do, though, is you can decide who you vote for, what message you send the rest of the country about who you're going to send back there. I think that it's fair to make a point about my opponent, that my opponent was always the person who was putting up the fight. 102 times he was the one no vote on the city council in 4 years. He voted against all 4 of Jerry Sanders' budgets, although I'm sure, I didn't hear him, but I'm sure he claimed credit for what was in them. He voted against the $700 million health care savings that they did. He's been called divisive by his own party and by the Republicans who selected Kevin Faulconer to run for mayor over him, saying, you're too divisive to run for mayor, you should run for Congress. And that's what the LA Times reported. So, you know, what San Diego has a lot to do with answering your question, which is who do you send there? Do you send someone who's got a proven record of being willing to work with anybody, being willing to shake the hand of anybody, to work together, versus someone who's got the record of being exactly the opposite? And I think it starts here. If you send me back, that sends a message to the country about what you expect out of Congress. That's why I'm running for re-election, and that's why I hope I'll have your support.
Thank you.
Mr. Peters, I have a series of questions about internet service providers such as Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon, and their responsibility to their consumers. The internet has become a lifeline for communication, entertainment, information, and business. Many voters are worried that internet service providers have too much control and are not acting in the public's interest. Proponents of a concept called net neutrality want the Federal Communications Commission, otherwise known as the FCC, to regulate internet service providers. Should the FCC regulate internet service providers, or will innovation and competition be enough to solve the problem?
Well, the answer is really both in a way, because innovation's happening in the private sector in the internet, but we're all very concerned that the internet would be closed off to certain people, or would be slowed down, or that access would be denied to people or discriminated against. So what we want is, you can call it net neutrality or an open internet. I support that. In 2010, the FCC passed an open internet rule that Verizon sued to overturn, and they were successful in proving that, or in claiming that, that the FCC did not have a congressional authority to make that rule. And so now there's been a fight about whether we should be regulating the internet as a utility. I don't believe we should regulate the internet as a utility, because if you think about what happens in the utility context, is innovators will go ask permission from the federal government, it will be denied, but the federal government will never understand innovation as well as the private sector. So I have a bill to restore the open internet rule, which would set a standard for where we want the internet to get, and would tell the internet service providers to get there without discrimination, to expand broadband, to open up access to everyone, and support the open internet that you and I both want.
Okay, so my second question is, why is internet service not considered a utility? And what are the benefits and drawbacks of regulating the internet as a utility? And if it's not regulated as a utility, how would you prefer to regulate it?
Okay, well, I tried to answer the question, but let me just, so I'm clear. Think of the utility as the water department or the PUC regulating the electric companies. It's by definition almost anti-innovative, because you have to file an application to make a change. Then they have to review it. And you have a lot of people who are not necessarily that versed in it, trying to catch up with the industry and figure out what's going on. And then they might give you permission. And there's no guarantee that a government acting as a utility would provide a better answer than the FCC. So the way I'd like to do it is much more nimble, but gets to the same result, which is through regulation, set out where we want the internet to be. We want it to be open. We want it to be fair. We want it to be faster. We want it to be innovative. And then charge through the internet rule, which my bill would restore, charge those ISPs with getting you to that point through their ability to innovate and their knowledge of the systems.
Bills that aim to establish net neutrality have failed in the House because both parties cannot come to an agreement. What will you personally do to ensure net neutrality despite opposition? What compromises are you willing to make?
Well, again, I've reached out to we have a pretty active open government group here that's a citizens group. I've reached out to them. I've held a roundtable with them to sort of listen to what they want. As a result of that, what I did was I introduced a bill that restored the open internet rule that was overturned by the courts. My specific action, okay? What compromises, again, if we could get the speaker to direct that to a committee. The Science Committee is one, Science, Space, and Technology Committee is one that I sit on. We would love to have a conversation about it, and I would just tell you that if we can get that direction, you have someone here who's willing to compromise and who can make agreements. And we, that's been my whole record through a lifetime of public service. I would just say too, the reason I'm endorsed by not just by the Democrats, which I'm proud of, but also by many traditionally Republican constituencies, the police and the DAs and the doctors and the dentists and the real estate agents. 10 former Chamber of Commerce chairs out of 11 who endorsed me are Republicans. The United States Chamber of Commerce endorsed me, which I'm one of 5 Democrats in the country out of 250 candidates they've endorsed, because they know that I'm someone who can work with anyone. And if we're gonna keep at Congress to make sure that we have those kinds of discussions. And when we do, when we open it up through voter pressure, I'm going to be someone who can fashion agreements, and that's been my history.
Thank you.
Many Americans fail to realize that each year the United States budget relies on deficit spending or borrowing money to meet the U.S.'s national expenses. Currently, the United States is $17.8 trillion in debt. Bearing in mind that the 4 biggest expenses to the United States budget are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense, what are the steps needed to restructure the budget to close the deficit and start paying back the debt?
Well, I think I'm very concerned about the debt as a percentage of economy. The country's strong enough and big enough and wealthy enough to carry a certain amount of debt, but it really has to make sure that it doesn't exceed our ability to carry it. And you've identified some of the challenges, which are more political challenges than academic challenges. I was a supporter of the approach taken by the Simpson-Bowles Bipartisan Commission in 2010 to deal with these issues. In 2010, the issue was actually a lot tougher. The annual deficit was I don't know, 3 or 4 times what it is today, because we were in recession. Unemployment claims were higher, tax receipts were lower. Before I came into Congress, Congress made a lot of the tax increases and made a lot of the spending cuts that the Simpson-Bowles bipartisan plan suggested, and now the economy is doing better. So tax receipts are up, unemployment claims are down, and that means that the hole we have to fill is a lot smaller. And I'm a proponent of following that method to try to deal with those issues. You don't have to cut the benefits to deal with those issues, but you have to deal with the long-term funding issues. And there's a nice thick document. If you'd like to go through it, I'd be happy to. But there's a lot of academic agreement on what we need to do. It's just a matter of having the courage to shake hands with the other side and find consensus.
But a major issue is, in this case, Social Security and Medicare. So the baby boomers are retiring, and when they retire...
I'm ready to retire.
As they retire, there are going to be fewer people working who are going to pay the taxes for Social Security and Medicare, which are primarily driven by taxes. So what do you plan to do then? Because that's a long-term issue, and many economists have stated that Social Security is going to essentially collapse in around 2030, I believe. So what do you say to that? How would you restructure the fundamental principles of Social Security so that we get benefits and we still have a social safety net, but that still make it manageable so we don't add to that $17.8 trillion?
Well, as I said, there's a laundry list of things we can do to provide stability. One of them is, as I said, immigration reform. One of them is lifting the cap on earnings that's in there. One of them is talking about the long-term funding formulas. There's plenty of solutions on how to make sure that these things are available down the road. It's just a matter of whether you want to sit down and make those changes. I will say that there's an idea out there that I'm supporting of a Social Security Commission that would actually come up with a plan that would be lead to an up or down vote on a Social Security plan for Congress. It's a bipartisan idea, sponsored by Tom Cole and John Delaney, a Republican and a Democrat. If Congress isn't able to do it, I would support that kind of approach to actually bring an answer to the Congress and let us take a vote.
But do you have any specifics on a plan right now that you would like to outline for us? Because the election is coming up, and we would really like to know what parts of the plan you support or what parts of a plan you would like in a plan that this commission would come up with.
Sure, and I guess I would refer you back to the Simpson-Bowles bipartisan plan in 2010. It had a whole laundry list of things you could do on various angles on Social Security and Medicare to provide stability and make sure that those programs are here over the long term.
And for the $17.8 trillion of debt, which is being paid back with interest and is
Right.
interest due on it,
Right.
how would you tackle that? Because that's going to require, by definition of basic economics, that we give up something or we raise taxes to pay down this debt. So what would you like to do?
Well, closing the budget deficit is actually a three-part thing. It is taxes, it is spending cuts, but it's also economic growth. And this is what Bill Clinton used to say. If you can grow the economy, a lot of these deficit issues are taken care of. And I've been a proponent of something the Harvard University has called the Competitiveness Project. It's the 8 steps. You can read about this in The Economist magazine in April 2013, that the government could take to get the economy moving right now. Immigration reform is one, tax reform, bringing back money that's trapped overseas, regulatory reform, trade issues, stable federal budgeting, a sensible energy policy. All these things are things we could do to get the economy going. And we're not talking about a theory of scarcity. Then we're talking about a theory of abundance. And what you do when you get the economy to grow is your tax receipts go up, your unemployment, because jobs go up, your unemployment claims go down. And that's really the best way to tackle, I think Republicans and Democrats agree, that's the best way to tackle the budget deficit. And in the long term, the debt that's being added up. And I really do believe that's the best way.
With regards to Social Security, and you mentioned Simpson-Bowles,
Right.
For those of us who really are unfamiliar with what might be in that, are there 1 or 2 points in that particular piece of legislation that you'd care to highlight?
There are, so I would just say 2 that have been talked about the most. 2 that have been talked about the most. One is whether there's a cost of living adjustment that has to be made over the long term, whether we're really tracking the cost of living. One is whether the payroll cap now, it used to be that 80% or 90% of payroll was subject to Social Security payments. Now it's down to 80% because of the way the demographics, whether that could be adjusted. But there's a whole range of things that if we do it now, don't cause a lot of pain and don't cut benefits. And I think that's the right approach.
But you brought up the 3-part plan to raise money to pay down the debt, but that's assuming the economy grows. And I think 2008 showed that that is not something we can always trust. So if anything like that happened, the debt would continue to rise. So
If the
how do
economy
you
doesn't grow,
guarantee-
we're in deep trouble. If the economy does not grow, we're in deep trouble. I'm going to give you that. I don't think there's any answers if the economy doesn't grow. That's why things like immigration reform, which would start the economy tomorrow, would jumpstart the economy tomorrow. Tax reform, which the Republican, the tax writer, Dave Camp, who chaired the Ways and Means Committee, he came up with a tax plan that would have been really good to discuss, and the speaker killed it the next day. And the next week, the chairman said he wasn't going to run for re-election again. So you're right. If the economy doesn't grow, we're in deep trouble. But there are ways we can be acting today to make it a priority to grow the economy. That's why I get on the plane every week. So you're right. If the economy doesn't grow, you can expect a lot of pain.
We have about 4 more minutes for the panel, so if you bring up those questions from the audience, we'll conclude from about 1:35 to 1:45 with the questions from the audience. But panel, the lightning round.
This is about the Ebola outbreak.
Yeah.
Mr. Peters, in the second debate a couple weeks ago, you said, quote, "We need a 3-part approach for dealing with Ebola. We need to make sure we prevent people from getting on planes who have Ebola, make sure we care for them while they're here, and develop a long-term solution,"
Right.
end quote. Do we also have a humanitarian obligation to send aid to West Africa, where over 4,000 people have died?
I agree. It's not just humanitarian. It's also an important part of the fight. And I thank you. I should have made it a 4-part answer. You guys are paying really close attention to what I say, so that's good. Containing it in Africa is also really important, both for humanitarian reasons and for fighting the outbreak, too, because the larger the problem grows in Africa, we can't kid ourselves that it's going to be contained. So we ought to be supporting those countries in their efforts to make sure that it is contained in Africa where it's starting, and I agree.
What specifically U.S. support would you endorse? Troops, supplies, funding?
Well, I don't think you can fight Ebola with troops, but I think that medical know-how is something that we can impart. I think doctors across, I didn't mean to be sarcastic, I'm sorry about that. But I think that any kind of medical support we could provide, any kind of know-how, Doctors Without Borders has been providing help. I think that kind of stuff we should all be supporting.
Sorry, troops was, President Obama endorsed ground troops to go over to help regulate some of the systems
Okay.
because, sorry, that's
so
what I
I stand
meant.
corrected.
Yes.
Thank you.
We do have time.
I'll try to make this quick. Some Americans are concerned that the government has undermined privacy rights in the name of security. As a member of the legislative branch, you help decide how much power is given to governmental bodies such as the National Security Agency, also known as the NSA. Mr. Peters, you voted yes on the Cyber Information Sharing and Protection Act, called CISPA, that would strengthen the NSA surveillance programs by encouraging businesses to share data with the government. Opponents of this bill claim that it encroaches upon civil liberties. A new bill that is very similar to CISPA was introduced by Senator Dianne Feinstein, called the Cyber Information Sharing Act. Many believe that this bill also does not properly address the sharing of personal information. If given the chance, how would you vote on the Cyber Information Sharing Act?
I think the Senate bill is the companion to CISPA, which I supported for this reason, which is right now, and I don't think it is the same issue. The idea of the CISPA was to allow companies to trade information, we're being attacked. So if Bank of America could tell Wells Fargo, we're getting an attack, without sharing the content of the accounts for Bank of America with Wells Fargo, but to say this is the kind of bot that's coming into our system, right now they have real liability concerns about that, and CISPA was a way to try to let them share information with the government that we're being attacked in this way as a bank, or we being this attacked in this way as a power company. And that's going to be really important. Again, not to reveal any privacy data about people, but to make sure that we have defense so that when things happen, when things happen with Target or Home Depot, it's less of a concern to me than when they come after critical infrastructure like our water supply or power plants. So we have to have the ability for those affected by cyber attacks to share information, and that was the idea of CISPA. On the NSA, we did stop the metadata collection in a different act, I think we're always struggling with the balance between the ability to protect ourselves from attacks like the Boston Marathon bombing or like the attacks on 9/11 versus the need to regulate, to make sure that privacy is protected. And I think we'll continue to wrestle with that balance. But when a lot of us found out about the metadata collection, for instance, we did reverse that. We created an advocate for the public in the FISA court so that when people are coming after your information, you'll have an advocate saying, they shouldn't get every time. That didn't exist before. And we'll try to continue to turn that dials in a way that both protects us and protects our privacy and our civil liberties.
Many are concerned, though, that these acts, such as CISPA and the Cyber Information Security Act, don't appropriately address personal issues, and there's potential for a lot of this information to get out into places where it shouldn't be, where it should be more protected. And many believe that it doesn't address these rights in proper way, and it doesn't give enough information as to what the government will be restricted from doing with this personal information.
Yeah. Well, on CISPA, I disagreed with that. I think it was pretty clear that, you know, it's like someone described that you could see the airplane flying, but you didn't know who was on it or what they were talking about. The idea was to provide the private sector enough ability to share the information they needed to protect themselves without giving up personal data, so we could defend ourselves against these cyber attacks. I thought it cut the right balance.
Any last burning question? If you've got a burning question, otherwise I want to honor the audience's patience and be able to take some questions from the audience. Go ahead if you've got one more.
One last question. As a former environmental lawyer and EPA economist, and in your past term in Congress, you have demonstrated a strong environmental record. California is experiencing a severe drought, and Southern California has been increasingly susceptible to wildfires, ocean acidification, and warmer summers. All of these factors make environmental issues a huge concern for many Americans, and especially San Diegans. Aside from bills you have already supported or introduced, what new legislation proposals do you have in mind to make sustainable energy more cost-efficient for the 52nd District?
So I'll tell you, I really could give you a half-hour talk on this. Let me just say that I'm chair of the Democrats' task force on climate. I've worked with UCSD students on fighting climate pollutants, in particular the short-lived ones that are much more dangerous in the short run, like methane, hydrofluorocarbons, and black carbon. But the one thing I would say that in terms of sustainable energy, I would just call out is that on the Armed Services Committee, I'm really working on energy issues. And the two issues are the Navy wants to invest in biofuels. It turns out that one of the centers of algae research, algae can be a feedstock for biofuels, is San Diego, UCSD. So I've tried to promote that. Actually, I'm the co-chair of the bipartisan congressional algae caucus. Did you know there's an algae caucus? My wife says that makes me a successful pond scum politician. You don't like my algae jokes? They grow on you. Okay, there was one. That'll be my last one. Thank you very much. But if you think about if the Navy wants to invest in biofuels, not because they're tree huggers, but they want to be free from the spikes in world oil prices, and it's not an issue where a lot of the Republicans are in climate denial. It's hard for them to talk back to the military. The other issue on alternative energy in the military is solar energy. The person who's been most enthusiastic about solar energy that I've met in the Capitol is not a member of the Sierra Club or some environmental group. It was the Commandant of the Marines. Now, why do the Commandant of the Marines care about solar energy? It's because one of the most dangerous things we do in the battlefield is move large amounts of petroleum from one place to another. When they get attacked, we lose Marines and we lose soldiers. So they're powering their bunkers with solar panels. They've got solar panels on tents to keep the computers cool. They got solar panels on backpacks to power small appliances, and they're lighter than the batteries that the troops used to have to carry around. So that's good for the troops. They want to do desalination with solar panel, which we don't have yet. But imagine a relatively small investment in research from the Department of Defense, which has a huge budget, could have huge commercial implications for sustainable energy in the general economy and in San Diego, where we have a big clean tech presence. And you know, the climate deniers can talk back to the Department of Energy or to university deans, but it's awful hard for them to say no to the Commandant of the Marines. So I think that's an area where we found some agreement, where we can actually make progress on climate, even though too many people are pretending that it's not happening.
You spoke about solar energy. What would be the first steps to give the average household some solar panels?
Well, you know, again, the incentives are pretty strong. If you look at the payback period right now, a lot of people are really in a position where it makes a lot of sense. So, you know, I would investigate, you know, what the payback is and what it would cost on your homes. I think it's pretty available. In California, it's pretty good. California is leading the country in this because we're committed to providing a third of our power by renewables by I think 2030 or 2020. We're well on our way to meeting that goal, and part of that will be solar energy.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can I just get another nice round of applause for this panel? Again, great job. Great questions, great follow-up. Let me ask some quick questions from the audience here. We were talking about Ebola here. One of the questions is, why are we not restricting travel from countries with Ebola? I would expand on that. I've asked this question on the air. We're restricting folks within the United States from flying who have been potentially exposed to Ebola, but we're not restricting air travel from people outside the country where Ebola is running rampant from coming to this country. So why are we not being more restrictive?
Well, I think we might think about that, Mark. The question I have, though, is, if you can't fly directly to New York, are you going to fly to Brussels and then to New York? And I think it's an issue. The bigger issue is making sure we have good protocols for making sure that wherever people are, if they have been exposed to Ebola, they're not getting on a plane. And we had the same problem in the United States with someone who had been exposed, remarkably called the CDC, and was told, go ahead and fly. And that's the kind of stuff that makes me crazy. And so, just parenthetically, I've been talking with our local community hospitals and healthcare providers to make sure, and I know that they're engaged in making sure we know where our gaps are locally, we know where our where our strengths are, we know where the questions are. So that's happening today at my urging. We also don't want to have happen what happened in Dallas, where they just fumbled the ball on taking care of the man who died, sent him home with 103 fever. So we have to make sure that, again, we have to make sure we're ready to deal with it at home, and we have to have good protocols wherever the plane takes off from. But I'm not sure that I think a ban like that would give a false sense of security.
To give you some context, in the last segment with Mr. DeMaio, we talked a lot about the break-in at his campaign headquarters, the so-called playbook, and the accusation was made that your campaign, you specifically, held on to the playbook for some period of time without revealing that you had it. So that's the context of this question coming from the audience. Why did you keep your opponent's playbook and not come out and say some criminal had given you that playbook? And who gave you the book?
It's baloney. Let me just tell you, I didn't have a playbook. There's no such thing as a campaign playbook. Nobody sits around with a book of plays. It's not a football team, A. B, we did the right thing. We had this stuff given to us, and I don't talk about what's in it because it's an ongoing criminal investigation today. But we gave it all to the police immediately, which is what you should do. And I hope if anyone else comes across something like this, you do the same thing we did. We turned it over to the police right away. And we wish that they would be more forthcoming about what's going on. But we did the right thing. And this is an attempt to divert your attention from some really serious allegations that have been made against my opponent. And we ought to figure out, you ought to listen to what those allegations are, and not blame. Mr. DeMaio shouldn't be blaming other people for stuff that happens in his office.
So to be clear, because there's 3 or 4 questions that relate to that, so I'll just
Imagine
paraphrase.
that.
There was no playbook?
There's no playbook.
So you didn't withhold anything?
We didn't withhold anything. We gave everything we got to the police immediately.
Immediately. So did your campaign review that material first?
As I've said before, Mark, my campaign manager looked at it enough to know what it was, immediately recognized it was something that should be turned over to the police, and that's what we did.
So again, going right to the audience's questions, you personally did not review this
I've never seen
information? You've never seen the information?
Never seen it.
All right, and your direction was when you became aware of it?
We talked about it for about 3 minutes, and we said, this sounds like something we should talk to the police. I called the chief of police myself. She agreed, and we gave it over to her the next day.
Okay.
Which is what you should do. It's the right thing to do.
Well, and this question was asked of Mr. DeMaio, and they asked that we ask it of you as well, so it's a carryover from last segment. I've seen a lot of negative campaigning of each candidate on TV. How do you think that helps your campaign? And again, they state right on here, a question for both of you.
Okay. So, it's important for you to understand both why I think I should be elected and why I think my opponent shouldn't be elected. So there's a certain amount of negative campaigning, I guess you could say, is fair. I think it's fair to say my opponent has a Tea Party record. I got the goods to back it up. And it's not a personal insult. It's nothing unethical about having an extreme right-wing record. It is just, it's his politics, and that's fine. And that's a fair hit. And if he wants to try to characterize me as a Democrat of some bad standing, then he should do that. What I do object to is, though, stuff that goes after your personal integrity. And the one I would call out, Mark, is the idea that I made money on stocks in Congress, which first of all, Congress doesn't vote on contracts. So I never voted on a single contract. I had no influence into what contract the military gave to any company, period. And that's why every fact checker who's reviewed that ad has said it's false, it's outrageous, and it's a lie. Okay? And that's crossed the line. That's an insult on my integrity and my wife's integrity. So come after me for my policies any day of the week. You know, that's fine. If you think that what I've said to the panel is wrong, or, you know, you should come after that. That's a fair thing. That's a negative attack, right? But it doesn't go to my integrity, and that's what I object to. I could also talk about my car allowance too. If the whole campaign,
Well, there is a question here.
The whole campaign's about
from
the
the
car
audience.
allowance.
It says, "What do you have to say to those who criticize you for driving a $70,000 car funded with taxpayer dollars?"
I have the, you know, it's interesting because I got when I was elected to Congress, there was a compensation package that paid you about $73,000 a year, and they give you $900 a month for your use of your personal vehicle for city business. Now that's what he's aggregated together and said, I billed the taxpayers for a BMW. That's not true. And you know, I got the same car allowance, same compensation that everybody else get. What he didn't tell you is that I turned down $140,000 worth of salary at the city to spend on streets in my own district. So at least tell the whole story. And when you tell people that I get a city pension, tell them I've given back every dime to city libraries. Tell them also that I've turned down the congressional pension, I turned down the congressional health care. Tell them that when the sequester came across, the 8% pay cuts across the board that were concocted by Congress before I was elected and became effective, I cut my own pay by 8%. And tell them that during the shutdown, when the Tea Party shut the government down to try to repeal Obamacare for the last time, I hope, I gave my whole salary back to charities in San Diego to support veterans and seniors who were affected by those cuts. Tell the whole story. You know, don't make your whole campaign about me getting the same compensation that every council member got. Another, you know, ironically, when people started asking questions about whether you should just file a reimbursement form like everybody else, I was the first person to stop taking the car allowance. And the only person who takes it in my district today is Lori Zapp. I don't criticize her for it, but he used her in his ads to run for re-election and never said boo about it. So just tell the whole story. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Congressman, I want to honor your time commitment here today. We are up against it right now.
Right.
Please take a couple of seconds just in final thoughts, and we'll honor our time.
I want to thank you all for being here. I didn't talk to any of you. Sorry, I didn't look you in the eye, but first of all, I want to say this, I want to thank La Jolla Country Day School for being one of the most engaged schools in the region. I want to thank you again for the many invitations I've had here and the opportunities to interact with you at the City Club and at Mr. Schulman's class and in your assemblies. I appreciate that very much. And I want to say thank you for being engaged. You know, it's one of the challenges we have as a nation, and one of the challenges you have, is the lack of participation by people who are younger. And what that means is that the issues that we'll talk about are issues that are of interest to people who are older. Well, the reason we talk about senior drug costs, not because it's not important, but because we spend a lot of time on it, because those are the people who vote. And if you vote and you participate, we're going to talk about education. And we're going to talk about the environment and climate in a lot louder way. So it's very important that you're here. I hope you will all, those of you who can vote, will vote. Whoever you vote for, please participate and continue to be engaged as you continue your careers and your education. I also want to thank the other participant here, the Pruess School, which is a remarkable institution here, a true San Diego invention, like we invent stuff. And I want to thank you for being here too, and for their sponsorship as well. We're very, very proud of what Pruess does, and we've set a model for the rest of the country to follow, and we wish you all the best too. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for being here as well. Hannah's got something she'd like to say here in closing. But again, thank you very much. Thank you for being challenging, for being probing, and being thinkers. I always say when I come to Country Day, and now I'll add Pruess to that, I don't worry about the future of this country as long as these young people are the ones that are probing, asking the questions, and making the decisions. And thank you for the question on Social Security.
Thank you. On behalf of all the AP Government students, we thank everyone for their time and their participation. We hope that you learned a lot on the issues that are important to you, and that you are able to make an informed decision if you are voting this year. Civic engagement is important to us because democracy is highly dependent on active participation of its citizens. By getting involved or by voting, you are supporting a democratic nation and establishing the building blocks for our future and future generations. We hope that everyone has a great afternoon.